go in. So if you're paying extra money, or I went for an after work event and we got to go into this like trolley car, and you can have an event in there, it seats like 6 to 8 people, but it was so cute. Just a really old train car that kept up in terms of antiques. And if you got big donors, get to go and have tea parties if they want, dinner parties.
Didn't know that.
What's that place called?
The
Science Center?
Growing up, it was the Omniplex, so I always have trouble. I think it's the Oklahoma Science and Art Museum, or Science Museum. I think it's just the Science Museum.
Maybe.
It's awesome, though. I love it.
I think there was like a women's tech event, and that's how I went.
And they have have you been to one of the adult nights where they open it up and do special exhibits and have you get drink tickets with your entrance?
I was there for a private, I think maybe women in tech event at night. So we had drinks, and a private tour. Like the president came, and she took a few of us into the trolley. Wow.
Aww. I didn't know they did that. That's fun. I've just been to, I think we went to a Star Wars night or something. Everyone was dressed up like Star Wars characters. Wearing their lightsabers around.
Cute. I don't have Techlahoma up. Are we streaming?
We're streaming. I just pinged the channel. So let's see. We got about 9 people in here right now. Hello, everybody.
Hello, welcome.
Darby, I know you're remote right now, but are you eventually, will you come up here to Oklahoma City for some meetings? Do you know what your future work life is like?
I'd like to go up to Oklahoma City for some meetings, maybe meet some people in person.
Seriously?
I haven't met anybody. But to my knowledge, I think just for meetings, eventually, maybe for some research, eventually would be nice.
Yeah.
To Darby's knowledge, none of us have lower bodies.
Yes.
Right.
Everyone is just...
Yeah.
Doesn't know how tall anyone is.
Nope.
The guy is tall. Just putting that out
I've
there.
been told.
Been forewarned.
I mean, even David is in Dallas. I've not met him.
Oh yeah.
So that's okay.
Someday.
Maybe.
I was home in DC for Christmas, and I did get to meet not a company above mine, Global Payments. They hired this young designer, and she works remotely and hasn't met anyone. And there's no office in DC either way. So it was nice. We got to grab coffee, and she's like, I've met one person in this company.
Yeah,
so it was nice to.
Our office is closing.
Everybody.
Maybe I'll just road trip up there anyway.
Well, maybe we can have a boxcar team meeting.
That's right.
The Science Museum. Yeah. Wonder if they would spring for that.
Maybe. Probably.
I want to do one of those escape rooms sometime.
That'll be fun team building.
Fun.
Right?
Yeah.
A guy like this.
I always get really distracted with the stuff that's totally not important to the story or escaping. So there will be a random book that's on a shelf or something, and I'm like, it's in the book. It's got to be in the book, and I'll be reading this whole book the whole time, and everybody else will be like, no, Alex, stop.
I bet somebody in our channel or who's watching now knows it. There's a specific term for that in game design that I just learned about in an article I read last week, where people humans have the tendency to find patterns. That's a great thing about humans, but the problem with it is sometimes we find patterns in meaningless information.
Would it be some sort of cognitive bias, or is it something different that you
Well, the example was talking about a game designer talking about like how conspiracy theories develop, and his example was a game he designed one time where they were in a basement and there were like chunks of wood on the floor just for like the ambiance of it, but some of the wood looked like it was lined up to make an arrow. And the entire group got totally fixated on that arrow pointing at the wall, and they were trying to break the wall down and
Chevron pattern people.
Right, like that was random. Stop pounding on the wall.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, in video games, people like hide Easter eggs all over the place, so like it kind of makes sense to at least experiment in that way.
Which is why we do user experience research.
It is 11:36, so I'm gonna go dark. And what's our count online now? Could you see?
We got 20 people here, so we're probably pretty good to go ahead and at least start through our announcements and everything. Gaia, if you want to take it away.
Sure thing. Yeah. Welcome everyone. So glad to have you all here. Thanks for hanging in with the meetup group as we continue to ride the wave of online meetups. And it's so great that we get to share with more people around the country as well. So if you're outside of Oklahoma, an extra warm welcome to you. We are Oklahoma. Oh, I also need to say that our Twitch channel is being a little funky today. So if the name that you see on the Twitch channel is not the name I'm saying, don't worry about that. You're still in the right place. Hopefully you are here for Oklahoma City Design and Tech User Group Meetup. Oklahoma City Design and Tech is the user group that is here to support the growth and understanding of design and design thinking for Oklahoma City tech professionals and business owners. We are part of Techlahoma, which is a larger nonprofit volunteer-run organization with a number of user groups on lots of different topics in the field of tech. Our mission at Techlahoma is to enrich Oklahoma's technologists of all backgrounds through education, connection, and opportunity. It's important to know that all Techlahoma events are meant to be safe and supportive spaces for everyone participating. We're here to learn and grow together. So always be respectful, and if you ever feel like you need to voice some concerns, please approach anyone on the leadership of any of our user groups. We have a really exciting event coming up that Alec is going to tell you about.
Sweet, yeah. So this is really, really cool. The first time we've ever done this. We're starting our annual conference, UXOK, and this is a all Oklahoma conference. So this year it was going to be in Tulsa, but we're actually going to be totally virtual. It's February 5th. You guys can actually, so it's next week, next Friday. You can go to uxok.org and look at a little bit more details as to who our speakers are and pricing and stuff like that. But just from a value standpoint, it's actually for one ticket, you get a t-shirt and you get a free lunch. We're partnering, I think, with like a food delivery service. So it's pretty cool. They're going to bring you whatever you want, I guess. And yeah, that in itself pretty much pays for the ticket on top of the hours of awesome content. So we're bringing in different speakers kind of from all over. We have somebody from Microsoft. We have a couple of different researchers, a product design lead, all kind of coming in and speaking. So make sure to sign up. It starts at 9 a.m. on February 5th. If there's any questions in the Techlahoma Slack group, there's actually a UXOK channel. So go in there and let us know if you guys have any questions or hit us up in the Twitch chat. But anyway, without further ado, Gaia, back to you.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, we're really excited about that. Okay, so today we have got a great talk lined up for us from Darby Siscoe. Darby is a senior UX researcher at Legal Shield. Darby's based in Dallas. She has her master's degree in emerging media design and development from Ball State University. She's had experience in the hotel and legal industries. She also works with some nonprofits on the side. And today she's going to be talking about lessons she's learned from helping teams leverage UX research in their software redesigns. So really looking forward to learning from you, Darby. Take it away.
All right. Thanks, Gaia. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to apologize in advance if there's trains near me. I live right next to trains here in Dallas or Fort Worth. So also have a puppy that just he might also get in the way. I was going to apologize for that in advance. But otherwise, I'm really looking forward to sharing a lot of these lessons I've learned with everybody. So Gaia, can everybody, I assume everybody can see my screen. Okay. So I want to talk about UX research and redesigns and how you can kind of leverage that to make the redesign more successful. Like Gaia said, my name's Darby. This is obviously an old picture of me. My hair is not this color anymore. And right now I'm working at Legal Shield. I'm a senior UX researcher there, where I'm helping them kind of redesign some web experiences. And I'll be talking a little bit about that today. In the past, I worked at Hilton, where I helped them redesign their property websites. So all of their hotel websites, we did a large redesign effort there for the whole enterprise. And a lot of my lessons I will be sharing from there as well. So really, UX research is still kind of, it feels new. So starting research with new teams who have never done or worked with a UX researcher before, it's really exciting. And my favorite thing about it, and what I've learned really, is it should be a conversation that everybody on that product team can contribute to, because everyone has a little bit of knowledge that they know about the product or the software that you don't already know, or that they have questions about. So especially when you look at redesign, like for example, Hilton, when we were redesigning all the hotel websites, research could contribute really greatly to improving the usability of those, making that digital experience a lot more pleasurable, de-risking some new ideas. Like we had a lot of new ideas we wanted to try and tackle, and then also ultimately maximize revenue as well. So it's a really exciting venture to start, and large redesigns for enterprise level can be really, really daunting, and research can really help answer a lot of those questions and keep you on track. So what I'll talk about a little bit today is kind of the steps I've found that are worth considering when you're bringing that researcher into the fold, especially in agile environments, working with product, with developers, with content writers, with the designers, of course. These are the 4 things I've kind of learned that have helped get the team really, really excited about those findings and making the redesign more successful in the long run. And the first thing I'll talk about is the very first thing you think about when you start redesigning, like what are we going to change and why? So making those objectives, determining within that redesign what questions you want to answer. That's the biggest thing you have to tackle first, especially when you're thinking about research. The second would be launching that research or planning that research, but putting together that plan, actually including the team in that process. So a lot of what you'll hear me say today is continuing to include the team, continuing to keep that conversation alive. That is what it's really helps with that when you get to the end of it and you need to restart this all over again. And then the analysis, including the team, how you can kind of include the team in that, and then kind of bring them closer to the results, and then ultimately sharing those and actually making those actionable. So these are the 4 things I'll talk about today. And so starting with the first thing, so the objectives, what those objectives are, what the team wants to learn, or what we want to achieve. And creating the objectives with the team at the beginning of the process is going to keep them engaged from the beginning to the end. So I have found in the past, like with Hilton, sometimes I would come up and be like, oh, I've heard you asking a lot of questions about this. So this is the objective I thought we would want to tackle. And so that's what I'll do a research effort on. And I found sometimes when I brought those results back, they weren't as excited about them. But if we sat down and had a conversation, like, what do you want to learn? Or what does that objective sound like to you? It's going to keep them engaged and invested once you get to the end of this process, because sometimes it can feel kind of long. And for that large redesign, really starting out was listing everything. For example, at Legal Ship, we started redesigning our accounts application, and really we had to sit down and think, what do we know? What do we want to learn? And actually let everybody kind of put down ask all the questions. And then we could take those and organize those questions in a logical way and actually form research objectives around them, and then plan them, and so that some efforts at the beginning may actually end up answering questions later. Some examples of objectives that I have found works or seem to work really, really well when you're starting to integrate this is keeping them, never using the word validate, because then people just, well, we all assume we're right. We want to be right. We love being right. It's part of it, but we want to evaluate, we want to learn, we want to determine, we want to assess. Those are the kinds of things we want to do. So those objectives are what I have found. I've worked with teams in the past that actually help them understand, like, we are trying to learn something. We're not trying to prove that we're right. It's nice when we are, but we want to understand and learn to be smarter. And that kind of helps keep the conversation going as well. It's like, we're evaluating this. So it's like, rather than coming in with an opinion, you come in and you say, oh, we're evaluating, so we want to learn about it. And really those objectives should be to learn something new or what can be improved upon in the future, or add new information, what we already know. So that's a really key part, is if the objectives are not strong in the beginning, then it's going to bleed into the rest of the redesign, where if you weren't asking good questions at the beginning, then you don't have a good new information to make that new redesign really strong. So after you got all the objectives listed out, so for example, we were redoing all of our resort websites, and I think we listed out like 50 questions, and we made objectives out of all of them, and then based on those objectives made a plan. So here's all the things we're going to do now that we have all these questions turned into objectives. So I think we ended up with those 50 questions, ended up with like 30 objectives. So really big, right? It's a large redesign effort. So, but does that mean that everybody in the team was getting their questions answered? So now that you've got that, you take it back to the team. All right, here's what I think we need to do. And again, including the team in that process, because now it's like, okay, development, do you feel like your questions that you had about this are going to be answered? So it helps you make smarter decisions in your world, or design, are all your questions being answered, product, etc. So it's not just one, like, as a researcher coming in and being like, yes, these are the, like, making sure the objectives are nice, strong, but coming in and be like, yes, this is what we need to learn, but like, are we really answering everything you wanted to with this plan we've come up with? So as part of that plan, a large redesign is going to have a lot of different research efforts. So, and that's okay. And I think something I learned in the past was they thought, oh, so we'll just do like 2 or 3 different research studies and we'll be done. And that's not typically how it works. I've found that it really actually, it takes a lot. Like when we had 30 different objectives, it took us 6 months. For our accounts app, we had, oh gosh, we didn't have as many, I cannot remember, maybe 4 or 5, and it took us about 3 or 4 months to really get to where we wanted to be, in a place where we were happy with the results of that redesign and happy with the work that the research we put in that gave us that information. So it's going to have several different research efforts, and making that clear in the plan is really important up front, as it helps manage expectations of like when they're going to find out different information. And then within that plan, you can actually start making the plan for a specific research, like a launch. So for example, and you're going to make the methodology based on the learning objectives that you're addressing as a part of that plan. So for example, at Hilton, we first needed to do interviews as part of this resort redesign for the websites. So I made a plan for the interviews and sent the plan of all the questions we were going to ask the guest at the hotel, sent it out. So does this address everything we wanted to address for this specific objective? So they've seen the larger plan, now actually keeping it small and focused, so they know this is what we're learning about in this instance. And then continuing to show that methodology from there forward, and then it addresses all the concerns from everybody within the product team. And again, this keeps them really close to it so that they feel really involved and engaged and have an emotional attachment to what you're doing. So that by the end, when you start sharing the results, you're gonna have a lot more success finding action on them. From there, so this is actually my favorite part, is the analysis, is getting the team involved in analysis when it's appropriate, of course. So that is kind of, I hate saying this all the time, it depends. It depends on what your team knows about taking notes, if you've taught them anything. At Hilton and at Legal Shield, I have helped our designers learn how to take notes in a non-biased way, so that whenever we do unmoderated usability tests, they can actually go in and watch the videos and take notes, and then share those notes with me. So letting the team watch any user testing videos or sit in on interviews and take notes is a really, really awesome way to, one, get another perspective on what you're looking at, and two, again, really feeling that emotional connection to the research, the work that you're doing. They start to really get invested in what's happening, and you learn a lot more considering another perspective aside from your own, again, knowing with the caveat that they may not have that same experience with unbiased note taking. And then taking that back and again discussing with the team members what they learned and what you learned. So getting the team involved, like that, I think is one of the biggest lessons I learned at Hilton at first, was because it helped me manage my time, as trying to manage a large plan with 30 objectives, or even a smaller plan with 5 objectives. Like, getting the team involved helps you manage your time, and it really helps make sure you're not missing anything in the research. Even at, we all have our own biases, and that's okay, as long as you acknowledge that. But getting them involved gets them closer to that and seeing more of that. And then that discussion with the note takers, I always found has been phenomenal to me. It's because they get to learn more about what you do, and you get to learn more about what they do and why they see it a certain way, because the developer is thinking about something completely different than a designer, and that you can translate that into your results later. So you're actually communicating in a style with them that they understand and they'll want to take action on. So by having that discussion, you've learned how to share your results in a way that, like we talk about in UX, is more user-centered. You're making your reports more usable for them. And then sharing. I guess you could argue this is the most important part. This is where you actually share out the results, and things should hopefully be happening after you've made that report and you've learned something new, and you now know what you need to change as a part of that redesign. So for example, like we learned at Hilton what specific changes we needed to make to our rooms, like how we showed amenities. Sorry, I forgot what they were called. How we showed amenities in the rooms, like specifically how we showed those icons. Like we learned how to make that small change with one research effort, but then learning what do we do next? Now that we've done that, what's the next step? And making those findings actionable so that folks are actually doing something with them as you continue on, because you're inevitably you're going to move on to the next research effort. So, but you want to make sure that when you get here, they're excited enough about what you've done that something will change, even if it's small, or that they'll at least feel smarter or know how to make a good decision after all of this. So what I found, is making the readout a little more discussion based, actually, rather than just telling people, this is what I learned. And I learned this a lot at Legal Shield. So talking to them, like showing the highlights, like the key findings, and talking about those and being like, kind of actually stopping after everyone. Okay, does anyone is this something we already knew? What do you think about that? Is this something you're surprised by? Whatever it is, like actually letting them kind of talk about it, like, oh wow, that surprises me. Well, why does that surprise you? And it's kind of starts to go gears turning. So when you do get to the recommendations, when you're reading it out, they are also thinking about like how to make that recommendation happen. So rather than just being like, okay, this button here didn't work because no, it was covered by a picture, or this picture drew their attention too much and it took them away from this button and now they don't know where to go. That's actually talking about it more as a story, like they were looking for it and they really were invested in this image, and instead ended up not seeing this, but stopping and letting people kind of talk about that. Well, why is that? And then making those recommendations later. So some things I've learned about in my reports, that quotes are above and beyond like one of the things everyone loves. And it really, again, there's more of an emotional response and desire to act because somebody said something. Recently, we were testing something and somebody said bloody hell, like, because it was so overwhelming. And I put that in there and everybody was like, oh my gosh, we have to change this immediately. We don't want people saying that they're so overwhelmed by what they're looking at. But that's a good thing, right? So we talked about it. We did that discussion in the readout that I was just talking about, and they saw the quote and they're like, yes, we need to fix this as soon as possible. Like, this is actually prompting an emotional response from our users that we didn't want and we didn't know was happening. And again, from that process from the beginning to here, they were involved. They helped with the objectives. They helped set up usability tests. A designer was involved in taking the notes. And our product person was really closely involved with the plan of setting up that usability test. So by the time we got to there were enough individuals excited about what was happening that everybody was really excited to talk about what we learned. So hearing that quote and then seeing some of those videos in the report are either from a user test or even if it's just from an interview of someone saying something that really stuck out to communicate those points and those key findings, is another really great visual way to kind of back up what you've said and back up everything we've done up until this point, making these objectives, taking the time to look at this plan, make sure we are answering all the questions you wanted answered. This is what came of it, and this is why we're going to do something with it. And these things I have found more often than not help make those findings a little more actionable, more so than the list of like actual recommendations. Having these kind of things to support that, it actually makes them want to act on those recommendations. And then doing all those things prior also does. And then from there, you do it again.
Hey, Darby.
Yeah.
We have a question. So in these meetings where you're sharing out reports and involving the team, like who do you put on your meeting invite? What team members are included in that step?
So I think it depends on your setup, I guess. So at Hilton, I was embedded in a product team. So it was the lead product owner, the lead developer, designer, content writer, any leads who represented each group within the product team. So one representative from each group. So I guess legal is actually kind of the same way. Even if you're not embedded, just whoever is working closely on that project has been involved, any stakeholders that are necessary. If I don't know, I always ask the product person to make sure like that the right people are getting involved. This is actually perfect timing for answering questions. This is my email if anyone wants to email me questions later. But yeah.
Awesome, thank you. What was really standing out to me listening to you talk was the level of involvement that you're asking the team to have in the research process. Like what was coming to me was like the human interaction of that involvement and how a human-centered process. Our goal is to make human-centered experiences for the end user, but it's really, you're talking about a human-centered process.
Yep. Yeah, really, that's what it is. And that's, I guess, what I just found it to be the best way to get people involved. And like, I get to learn about what my teammates are doing. They get to learn about what I'm doing. And then we can all actually communicate more effectively in the end as well. Now that level of involvement is sometimes tricky because everybody, right, this is not part of their job, but like it at first comes off like, well, why are you telling me to do this? You're the researcher, you do it. It's like, no, I just want you to like look over it. You're still carrying the bulk of that work, but just letting them, have that opinion, have that like be heard. Because again, it's, we want to feel, we're humans, we want to be heard, we want to feel like we're being listened to, and that our questions are just as important as these other questions that are being addressed. But yeah, I think that's a really good way to think of it. And that's kind of how I think of it sometimes is even at work, we want to feel connected with everybody, and generally people are excited about user research when you talk about it. So this is just another technique to get them even more excited about it and acting on it. Because if they're excited, they're probably going to make changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like that conversation really does, like, it allows the teammates the opportunity to have those emotions, like excited about what they're doing instead of just executing orders.
Yes.
It comes alive.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself.
So when you're, I was interested when you were talking about objectives and like with a redesign, it's like, okay, we're going to redesign the website, and everybody involved has their own idea of what that means.
Yeah.
How do you, like, what are some strategies you've used to turn that like feature idea into objectives?
Yeah. So the first thing I said, well, why are we redesigning the website? Like, obviously we already know something if we're redesigning it. So what is it that we know about this that we need to redesign, and get them kind of focused? Because when you redesign is so big, like it's so exciting, and they're like, oh, did all these cool things, we now have the opportunity to do all these really cool new things. But starting like asking questions that make them focus on like one thing at a time. Like, okay, why are we doing this? What changes do we know need to happen? And we can start with that. Okay, what changes would we like to see happen? What questions do we have there that we need to learn before we feel confident? And then what, just from there, right, what do we want to try? But like kind of chunking it is the best way I can say it. Like not that we shouldn't think broadly, but think broadly at first, but then chunk it. Like, okay, let's address this part first, because that's the most immediate need right now, is that we need to get this redesigned. Like we know that, and we know we can probably have some reasons why that probably came from somewhere within the company. Someone knows something about this that needs to be changed. So let's address that first and address those questions first, because that's probably going to be the most immediate need that's going to also meet the most needs of everybody in the business. And then some things we think we know, maybe not, and then what we want, just what we want to do, cool ideas that we want to try that will be okay to answer a little bit later. They're not as much of a priority. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Have you ever had the experience of needing to do research in order to create good objectives, or research that has informed good objectives, and like what research methods have you used to do that?
So in the past, we've used analytics. I know we did use analytics at Hilton to kind of inform some research objectives. Like we knew this behavior was happening, but we didn't know why. So we're looking at these behaviors that are happening. Even honestly, at Legal Shield, we see that, or we'll look at something, we're like, okay, we see that people are coming to this, they want to make this purchase, but they're leaving. We don't know why. So using like, it depends on the question. My least favorite thing to say, but I feel like I say it a lot as a researcher. It depends. So it depends on the question. But I've used that a lot to kind of inform objective, or honestly looking back at old research that's been done. Like at Hilton, we did some research on the amenities. There was a survey done on amenities a long time ago. I think prior to when I did my own, it was the last one had been done 6-ish years before that. So we thought it was time for a refresh. But so the objective wasn't necessarily new, but we knew we needed more up-to-date information. So we went back and looked at research that had already been done and just took that objective and we're like, this is the same objective. We'll just do it again. So for new information.
Thank you. Yeah. I have a question coming in on Slack. When doing user research, one thing you said is that stakeholders still have a lot to say and still need to do most of the lifting. Could you contrast that with situations where, I think the question is when there's situations where the stakeholders need to be involved and kind of tell you what's going on, and then there's other situations where you need to take charge instead of just presenting the research and like redirect the focus or guide the conversation. What kinds of situations have you seen yourself having to do that?
Where I need to guide the conversation. Is that, am I understanding this right?
I think so. I think that's the question. That was my understanding of the question. When you're kind of, instead of kind of taking suggestions and going and doing research and presenting the findings, are you saying, well, this is what we're going to do?
Yeah. So I guess maybe I can make that a little more clear. A lot of the time, I'm still kind of doing that. Everything is like, you know, in this context, as a researcher, I know, like, I don't know, the team knows what we want to learn, right? And that is really, really important. But maybe I have a different perspective on like doing this methodology is actually going to answer 3 of the 4 questions or like 4 of the 4 questions. So we need to do it this way, right? And maybe because a lot of the time, what I found stakeholders, they really want to do usability testing. That's what everybody knows. That's the first thing when we say user research. A lot of people think usability testing right off the bat, and maybe that's not necessarily really what to do. And they say, "Oh, I was thinking usability testing," but when you know that's not really the right methodology based on what they want to learn, kind of spinning that, bringing that conversation back and saying, like, "Okay, what do you want to learn?" And then if you really want to learn by answering, we could do usability testing, but it's really only going to answer this one question you want. If we do this interview method instead, we're going to answer all 4 of your questions instead. So still being the guide on that, right? It's never like, oh, they tell you, and sometimes they're right, and that's awesome when they are, and I think they've learned something, but always being willing to be like, no, we really should do it this way if that's really necessary. But understanding what they want to learn is going to be the best way to be able to tell them how they're going to learn it.
So when you look to them for the what, and then you take the leadership on the how.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's great. I can totally relate to that. You know, we think sometimes business stakeholders think that they're going to learn a bunch of qualitative information from usability testing, but really we don't get much if we're doing just a kind of unmoderated quantitative test. We don't get much about the emotional experience of that, and maybe an interview would be a better strategy for understanding why they like something. Yeah. Another question coming in from Twitch. So if this is the first UX redesign initiative that a client is undergoing, what things can you do during the research process to instill that the redesign is going to be an ongoing effort? It's not just a one and done thing.
So one way I like to do that is every time I do any research effort, I almost always come back with, sorry, I forgot I also have a cat scratching at the scratch post. Hey, okay. I always come back from that research effort with more questions. So sometimes your recommendations are, yes, make these changes, but also the recommendations can be, we need to do more. Like these questions came up that we now need to answer. And that kind of shows every time you do it that it's still going to continue happening, right? It's an ongoing process. We keep learning about, because every time we do it, we learn something new, hopefully, that you didn't already know. And then a lot of the times we come back with a treasure trove of results, and some of those results are more questions. and being willing to communicate that. Because when you communicate that, hey, we have more questions that we need to address, they start to see that it's a process and it's going to keep going. It's not just going to be, okay, here's everything you need to fix. Your redesign's done. They at least know there is more that can be done, and you can continue to keep doing that process and always be improving.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Like keeping that sense of evolution alive by sometimes people, I worry as a researcher also that people will feel frustrated that like there's more questions.
Mm-hmm.
Like these findings have introduced us like a new realm of uncertainty, and now we have to do more research to explore that. So really like underscoring, we definitely learned this, and with more questions too. Yeah, I think how that's presented is like, are you enthusiastic about those more questions? Like, I think that's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, but also making it clear that the questions you had when you launched this research effort did get answered.
Right.
You just came back with more.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I love that. So it's almost like there's this what we learned, you know, and good job, team. And then, hey, here's the next frontier. Here's where the event horizon has moved to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah, and especially in, I think, agile teams, that's something you want to always be doing, because you want to be thinking ahead. You want the next thing you need to start thinking about and working on. Like, yeah, you got MVP, but what's MVP 2.0? So coming back with those questions, like it's okay to come back with more questions. Research should lead you to more.
Mm-hmm. Here's a kind of a logistical question for you. Like, how do you keep that organized for yourself?
I keep a backlog of research questions, and then I always, or at least so at Hilton, I told, like, when I came back, we had all the reports stored. We use Confluence at Hilton. Also, we're using Confluence at Legal Shield. I haven't found a really great way yet. This is what I found that's mostly working. So if anyone knows, that'd be great. But I keep a backlog, a personal backlog related to that project, of things like, these are the questions that came up that the team seemed interested in, but weren't a priority at that moment because of where we were at. And then maybe later, and I'll tell the product person, I'll tell the whole team, right? Like, but I write it down so I know. And then if I'm in a meeting later and they're like, all right, what do we do next? I'm like, hey, remember when we did this research effort A, like 2 weeks ago, and we talked about these questions that came out of it, and we were all kind of interested? We can do that next. But like, I think I have a backlog, I think, written down. Not the best way to do it. Probably like all the documentation in Confluent, it probably belongs with the rest of the research documentation. Thinking about that now, but keeping that backlog so know, like, hey, these are questions that came up that we want to answer now that we have the capacity to do that, that we've done that. We've done all of our priorities now, and we're looking to do the next great thing for us. These were some things that came up repeatedly over multiple studies that are probably worth our time, and especially keeping track of if it's something that continually comes up every single time. Like, if it came up once and you're like, oh, this sounds like a fun idea, maybe that's not as much of a priority as one that came up 5 different times over 5 different studies that were completely unrelated to it.
Mm-hmm. Do you have an example of when you've seen kind of a finding emerge over multiple studies, and like the first time stakeholders weren't interested in it, but after it was repeated?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the specific one. It happened at Hilton where it came up several times, and it was when we were looking at it was comparing rooms or doing comparisons. I've seen it with just, I think, e-commerce in general, like wanting to compare prices, where they're like, oh, it'd be nice if I could compare it. And we're like, yeah, that's great. And then we were doing something completely unrelated, and they were just looking around. Like, it'd be nice if I could compare this room to the other room. So they continually, for like 2 months, it just kept coming up. And we're like, all right. We'll think about it. We'll do it. We didn't get the chance to, unfortunately, due to COVID. But it's a really good example of what happened. Is like we were really focused on something else, and that something else was really, really important and made a big difference in our revenue. But that the room comparison, we're like, okay, yeah, we know you want it, but it's fine. But then it would come up when things that were completely unrelated, like we were talking about activities that they could do at the hotel, and they're like, I want to compare rooms. Right? Oh, okay, maybe this is now worth taking the time to invest a research effort in this and actually going forward with this.
Mm-hmm. And I think those moments, I've noticed for myself, those moments are like these just lovely opportunities for humility as a researcher. Because often that like, actually we are going to do this arises, and it's like they think it's their idea, even though you've been doing it for, a year.
Yeah.
And for me, like one of the compass points I try and remind myself is like, I'm here to make this team feel brilliant, not be brilliant.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway. So I think that's all the questions we have from Twitch and from Slack. I'm not seeing any more come in. We've got, so last call for questions. Darby, this was really great. Thank you for sharing your story and experience. You guys are welcome to email Darby, obviously, and then reach out to UXOK on, or sorry, that's the conference, OKC Design and Tech on Techlahoma Slack. We would love to chat more with you about research and ask if you have any follow-up questions from there. One more plug for everyone. We have got a Slack message coming in. Okay. One more plug for our UXOK conference next week. It's one day of online learning and community through from the Oklahoma City, or sorry, from Techlahoma. We've got speakers from all over the country though. $29 to get your ticket, and you get Postmates and a Postmates gift certificate and a t-shirt. So come on down and join us. Join the Slack even if you're not in Oklahoma. We'd love to grow our community outside of Oklahoma. We're also would love to have speakers. Darby's in Dallas. She's got me and Alec. We're a connection in Oklahoma City, but everyone watching, your connection, you've got a connection to OKC Design and Tech too. So let us know if you've got a talk you want to give. We are excited to learn and get to know people from all over the country. So please join. I think I've hit everything. Oh, there's one more announcement. Oh, great. I didn't know about this. We have got Oklahoma Able Tech's virtual conference. So this is the Oklahoma user group focused on accessibility in tech. Their conference is coming up in April 20th through the 22nd. So more learning to come from Techlahoma. So yeah, get involved. We want to hear from you. We want to see you. We want to meet you. Thanks everyone for joining today. I think we'll sign off from here.
Thanks everybody.